Hi guys, and welcome back to Is It Worth It reviews. Today we are talking about small and very affordable amplifier, but that doesn't mean it can't perform really well. It's Fosi ZA3, and let's see what it is all about. Now, Fosi ZA3 is a slight evolution of the V3 that I've already reviewed, and I will compare them a little bit later in the video. As you can see, it's a bit bigger, and it is also a Class D amplifier. It's based on the same TI module, I'll put that on the screen, and if you look at tech specs, it wields the same amount of power. Also, the same as V3, it uses external power brick, and you can buy this either in 32 volts or 48 volts. And I would recommend going with higher voltage because it provides you with higher power. So output power of this amp depends on its power supply. With 48 volt version, you get almost twice the power as you would with 32 volts. So it's some $20 difference. The price of this one with 48 volts, I believe, is $150. I'll put the exact price on the screen. And as you can see, they look kind of similar, but ZA3 is bigger. And why is that? Well, first of all, Fosi says they have slightly improved cooling because bigger casing made that possible. Another really important thing is that we now have richer connectivity. The Fosi V3 only had single-ended inputs and binding posts for your speakers, that's it. But as you can see, ZA3 here has both balanced inputs and single-ended inputs. Balanced are a combination of XLRs and TRRS, so you can use any of these cables, they will work. Speaker binding posts, as you can see, are slightly further away from each other, which makes connecting thicker cables easier, and I always like that. There's also an addition of subwoofer output here, and this one is with fixed crossover. I believe it's around 150 Hz. You cannot adjust the crossover frequency, it's fixed there, but the volume of that output, the level of that output, will follow your volume setting, which is very important if we want to have a useful subwoofer output. Then in the front, you can see that we have two switches that did not exist on V3 version, and one of them is to choose single-ended or balanced input, while the other one is to choose stereo or mono mode. That means that you can use ZA3 as a stereo integrated amplifier, two-channel amplifier, or you can bridge those amplifiers and make one mono amp of a higher power. In that case, you would buy two of these and you would have separate mono blocks, meaning you have more power, but also there is a better channel separation. And that would of course lead to the better sound fidelity, to the greater dynamics and better channel separation. At least from my experience, it's always like that. Two is better than one. But I do not have two of these, so I only tested it as a stereo amplifier. And just like V3, ZA3 performs really well. It has very neutral tonality. Nothing is really emphasized in terms of frequency response. Everything from baseline to highs feel well connected and in line with the other parts of the spectrum. Detail retrieval is really good, but it's not annoyingly sharp or etched, which is something that you might expect from a Class D amp if your last Class D amp that you tried was some 5 or 10 years ago. Those first Class D efforts had tendency to sound dry and sharp and annoyingly analytical, but it's not the case with ZA3. It has very neutral tonality. It has great detail retrieval, but there is also very pleasant naturalness and smoothness to its sound. Now, dynamics and just overall slam and grunt and impact are not great. And that's basically in line with what you can expect from a small and affordable Class D amp. Those high numbers in the datasheet, like 150 watts, 200 watts, might lure you in to expect some explosive amplifier, but it's not like that. You cannot expect this Fosi to compete with a big, chunky Class AB amplifier, such as, for example, Allo in 100. I mention it often because I reviewed it. It has 100 watts, and this one, at least on paper, with this better power supply, it's more powerful, but in reality it's not, because not all watts are created equal. It's not the same if it comes from voltage or if it comes from exceptional current output, if that is measured with 1 kHz test tone and when it's actually driving speakers. And the speakers themselves present different loads. Some of them are easy to drive. Some of them demands lots of power and sometimes lots of current, especially in the baseline region, if the impedance dips low and baseline requires a lot of energy. So all of that aside, I just wanted to say, be reasonable and don't expect from this one, even though it has lots of watts on paper, don't expect it to drive big, heavy load demanding speakers that have low impedance dips that drive them in some explosive manner with fantastic kick and slam, because it will not do that. It's not a minus for ZA3, it's just for me to be perfectly candid with you and to set your expectations on a reasonable level, because I see newbies around the hi-fi hobby talking to each other like, why would I ever want a huge chunky amplifier if this thing can produce 200 watts? Not all watts are created equal. That said, this is a very good sounding amplifier, just like the V3 was. As I said, clean, revealing, well-balanced, smooth sounding. And if you connect reasonably demanding speakers to it, it will perform really well. Just don't be unreasonable. Which leads me, of course, to comparison with V3. Now, we already talked about this connectivity and feature differences, but is there a difference when you use both of these in their stereo mode? So I tested that. I hooked both of these in my system and I listened them directly one versus the other. And I have to say that I didn't expect to hear any difference, but I did. And the difference was really small. I'm not sure where it is coming from. Maybe slightly different parts, capacitors or op-amps or something was used. I didn't have time to open them and look at the PCBs. But ZA3 sounds ever so slightly cleaner and a little bit snappier, whereas V3 sounds a little bit milder and slightly, ever so slightly softer. And I can detect that when I compare them directly one after the other, but if I was to listen to V3 or ZA3 and then somebody interrupted me for 10 minutes, I go out of my room, I come back, I continue listening to the music, and if in the meantime somebody switched from one to the other, I would not notice that. They sound like 95% or 98% the same, but there is that slight difference that I don't really know where it's coming from. So don't be bothered by that and choose according to your needs, according to connectivity and features. V3 is a fantastic, very affordable little amp. At its price point, you cannot say anything bad about it. But if you want to have a bit better connectivity, that subwoofer output, and in my mind probably the most important difference is that you can bridge these stereo channels and use ZA3 as a monoblock. Because you never know, you might be pretty happy with it as a stereo amp at the moment of your purchase, but sometimes down the road, maybe a year later or 2 years later, you acquire some different speakers that maybe need a little bit more power and grunt, and in that case, just purchasing another ZA3 and using them as monoblocks would be easy and straightforward path ahead, easy and logical upgrade. And because of that, if I would currently thinking about buying one of these and was on a verge which one to get, I would probably get ZA3. But if you know for certain that you will not need something like that in the future, that you will not need more power and two monoblocks, and you just want a small, functional, very decently sounding amplifier, you can also go for V3. It's a very, very good deal. And that would basically be it for today's video. I didn't want to make it too long because, as I said, they're 98% the same. So you can just go to my V3 review. There I talked more in length about its sound. I compared it to several different amplifiers, and I think I made some suggestions about the whole system, like which kind of speakers and DAC you could pair with V3. All of that is the same for Z3. So if you haven't seen that video already, I'll put it somewhere on the screen and I'll link it down below the video in the description, so you can go there and you can see all of these parts that are basically the same for V3 and ZA3. So I'm really happy that technology is moving that way and evolving in a way that really good sound fidelity is becoming cheaper and more affordable every year. I always think about that some 20 years ago, oh man, it's more like 24, 25 years ago, when me and my older brother got into this whole hi-fi hobby, we had to pay like 300, 350 for a Class AB amp that, when you would now compare to this one, it would not sound as resolving. It would sound much more colored, and in terms of power it would be similar, comparable, but definitely muddier, less resolving air and less neutral sounding than this one. And that fact always makes me happy when I test these small affordable amps. Because if you're not a crazy maniac like I am, and some of you I suppose, and if you're not looking at some really expensive and crazy good pieces of hi-fi, you just want to enjoy music and not spend much, things like Fosi ZA3 are there and they're good. That would be all for today. Tell me down below in the comments if you maybe tried something like this or if you plan to try them, and what is your personal use case scenario for these small and affordable but nonetheless very good amps. That would be all. See you next time. Bye.